Hello there, and welcome to Midnight Geography. Tonight we'll drift into the vast canvas that is the United States. Geography here is more than lines on a map. It's the story of a continent sculpted by time, where ancient seas left their salt in desert basins, where volcanic fury built island paradises, and where tectonic forces still push mountain ranges skyward by mere millimeters each year. This is a land of extremes living in quiet harmony, holding whispers of ice ages in northern lakes and memories of meteorites in desert craters. If you enjoy these peaceful geographical explorations, consider liking and subscribing. It helps other curious minds find their way here too. But for now, let's begin. In the hills of Pennsylvania, there exists a town that has been burning for more than 60 years. Centralia sits above a labyrinth of coal seams that caught fire in 1962, transforming what was once a thriving mining community into America's most haunting ghost town. The fire began, some say, when the town burned trash in an abandoned mine pit, not knowing they had opened a gateway to the vast coal deposits below. Today, smoke still rises through cracks in the abandoned streets, creating an otherworldly landscape where the ground itself exhales warm breath even in winter. The few remaining roads buckle and split from the heat below, painted with graffiti from visitors who come to witness this slow-motion catastrophe. Scientists estimate the fire has enough fuel to burn for another 250 years, perhaps longer. Nature has begun reclaiming the empty lots where houses once stood, though even the hardiest plants struggle where underground temperatures reach 1,000 degrees. The government bought out the residents, declared eminent domain, yet a handful of holdouts remain, living above the inferno in a legal limbo, their town no longer appearing on official maps. From this burning earth, we travel west to Death Valley, where extremes of a different kind define the landscape. Badwater Basin rests at 282 feet below sea level, the lowest point in all of North America. Here, in this depression carved by geological forces over millions of years, salt crystals spread across the valley floor like frozen waves, creating polygonal patterns that shift and reform with each rare rainfall. The basin gets its name from a pool of water so saturated with minerals that early surveyors deemed it undrinkable. Bad water indeed, though it sustains its own peculiar ecosystem of bacteria and algae. What makes this place even more remarkable is its proximity to greatness. Just 84 miles away, Mount Whitney pierces the California sky at over 14,000 feet, the highest peak in the contiguous United States. These two extremes exist in the same state, sometimes visible to each other on clear days, a testament to the violent geological forces that shaped the American West. The basin continues to sink, pulled down by the stretching of the Earth's crust, while the mountains continue their slow rise, pushed up by the collision of tectonic plates. The Earth itself can reverse the natural order of things, as the Mississippi River demonstrated in 1812. During the New Madrid earthquakes, one of the most powerful seismic events in American history, the mighty river that normally flows steadily toward the Gulf of Mexico ran backwards for nearly 24 hours. Witnesses described the horror of seeing the riverbed rise and fall like ocean waves, creating waterfalls where none had existed before, swallowing islands whole and birthing new lakes from what had been dry land. The tremors were so powerful, they rang church bells in Boston, over 1,000 miles away, and created waves in ground soil that looked like the earth had become liquid. The river's reversal wasn't just a single moment, but a series of upheavals, as massive earth blocks dropped and rose, temporarily damming the flow and forcing water to find new paths, sometimes backward over rapids, that formed and disappeared within hours. Today, the Mississippi has returned to its southward journey, but Reelfoot Lake in Tennessee remains as evidence of that terrible winter, a body of water created in minutes by the earthquake's violence, where drowned forests still stand as ghostly cypress stumps. Far to the north, Alaska holds a forest that dwarfs most countries. The Tongass National Forest spreads across 16.7 million acres of southeast Alaska, a temperate rainforest larger than West Virginia, where trees have stood for 8 centuries or more. This is not the Alaska of popular imagination. No polar bears or tundra here, but rather a world of towering Sitka spruce and western hemlock, draped in moss so thick you could lose your hand in it. The forest breathes with a presence that feels almost conscious, its ancient trees holding more carbon than any other national forest in America. Some of these giants were already centuries old when Columbus reached the Americas, their rings recording the history of volcanic winters, salmon runs, and storms that tried but failed to topple them. Between the trees flow over 15,000 miles of streams, where all 5 species of Pacific salmon return to spawn and die, their decaying bodies feeding the forest floor, creating soil so rich that Devil's Club grows with leaves the size of umbrellas. The Tongass receives over 200 inches of rain in some areas each year, creating a perpetual mist that turns sunlight green as it filters through the canopy. The Great Salt Lake of Utah presents a paradox of water that cannot quench thirst. With salinity levels reaching 27% in its northern arms, it surpasses even the Dead Sea in some areas, creating an environment so hostile to life that only specialized bacteria and brine shrimp can survive. Yet these tiny organisms support millions of birds that depend on this salty oasis in the desert. The lake is all that remains of prehistoric Lake Bonneville, which once covered most of Utah and parts of Idaho and Nevada. As that ancient lake evaporated over millennia, it concentrated minerals and salts into this shallow remainder, rarely more than 30 feet deep. The salinity creates such buoyancy that drowning becomes nearly impossible. Humans float like corks, unable to sink even if they tried. The lake's size fluctuates dramatically with precipitation patterns. It has shrunk to half its recorded maximum size during droughts, exposing vast salt flats that shimmer like snow under the desert sun. Microorganisms called halophiles turn parts of the lake pink and orange, visible even from space, creating an alien landscape that seems more Martian than terrestrial. The lake generates its own weather, producing lake-effect snow that blankets the Wasatch Mountains. Deep in Oregon's Cascade Mountains lies a lake of extraordinary purity. Crater Lake fills the collapsed caldera of Mount Mazama, which erupted violently 7,700 years ago in an explosion that scattered ash across 8 states and 3 Canadian provinces. The eruption emptied the magma chamber so completely that the mountain collapsed into itself, creating a nearly circular basin that slowly filled with rain and snowmelt. No streams flow into Crater Lake. No rivers flow out. It exists in perfect hydrological balance, with precipitation matching evaporation so precisely that the lake level varies by only a few feet across decades. This isolation has created some of the purest water on Earth, so clear that visibility extends to 142 feet deep, a clarity that gives the lake its famous blue color. The blue isn't from the sky's reflection, but from the water itself, molecules absorbing longer wavelengths of light while scattering the shorter blue wavelengths back to our eyes. Wizard Island rises from the lake's western edge, a cinder cone that formed after the main collapse, creating an island within a lake within a collapsed volcano, like nature's version of nested Russian dolls. The Everglades of Florida move so slowly that early explorers didn't recognize it as a river at all. This river of grass flows at a rate of just a quarter mile per day, creeping from Lake Okeechobee to Florida Bay in a sheet flow sometimes 60 miles wide, but only inches deep. The Seminoles called it Pahioki, meaning grassy waters, a more accurate description than the English name suggests. This slow flow creates a unique ecosystem where a change in elevation of just inches can mean the difference between sawgrass prairie and cypress swamp. The limestone bedrock beneath contains countless holes and channels, creating a hidden underground river system that mirrors the one above. During the wet season, the entire landscape becomes a vast moving sheet of water, dotted with tree islands called hammocks that provide refuge for creatures from panthers to orchids. The water's slow movement allows it to filter through the grass and periphyton, a complex mat of algae that forms the base of the entire food web. Apple snails the size of golf balls climb the grass stalks to lay their bright pink eggs above the waterline, while alligators excavate gator holes that become crucial refuges during the dry season. Michigan's sleeping bear dunes possess a voice of their own. These massive sand mountains along Lake Michigan's eastern shore can produce an eerie humming or squeaking sound when conditions align perfectly, when the sand holds just the right amount of moisture and grains cascade down the steep faces at just the right angle. The sound comes from sand grains rubbing against each other in a synchronized pattern, creating acoustic waves that can be heard hundreds of feet away. Local Ojibwe legend tells of a mother bear and her cubs swimming across Lake Michigan to escape a Wisconsin forest fire. The cubs, exhausted, sank beneath the waves and became the Manitou Islands, while the mother bear, waiting on the shore, became the massive dune. The dunes themselves are perched atop bluffs that tower 450 feet above Lake Michigan, created by winds that carried sand from the lake bottom when water levels were lower during the last ice age. The sand continues to move inland at a rate of several feet per year, slowly burying forests, creating ghost forests where bleached tree trunks emerge from the sand like bones. The dunes are actually younger than the pyramids of Egypt, forming only about 2,000 years ago. Deep in the borderlands between Georgia and Florida lies the Okefenokee Swamp, a place where the earth itself trembles. This vast peat bog covers 700 square miles, its name derived from Seminole words meaning land of trembling earth, because the peat deposits are so thick and waterlogged that footsteps send ripples through the ground, causing trees 80 feet away to sway. The peat, accumulated plant matter that never fully decayed in the acidic water, reaches depths of 15 feet in places, forming a floating mat over deeper waters. This creates a landscape that is neither fully land nor water, but something in between, where islands drift slowly across the swamp's surface, changing the map from year to year. The water appears black as coffee from the tannins leached from vegetation, creating mirrors so perfect that cypress trees seem to grow both up and down. Alligators cruise these dark waters like prehistoric submarines, while carnivorous plants supplement their diet by trapping insects in sticky leaves or pitcher-shaped traps. The swamp occasionally burns, even though it's mostly water. The peat itself catches fire and can smolder underground for months, creating an apocalyptic landscape of smoke and steam. Point Roberts. Washington exists as an accident of cartography, a tiny peninsula of American soil that can only be reached by land through Canada. When negotiators drew the 49th parallel as the border between the United States and British North America, they didn't notice this small peninsula dangling below the line. creating a geographic oddity that persists today. Residents must drive through British Columbia for 40 minutes to reach the rest of Washington state, passing through customs twice for a trip to the grocery store. Children attending school beyond elementary grades board a bus that crosses an international border 4 times each day. This 5-square-mile exclave has developed its own peculiar culture, part American, part Canadian, part something entirely unique. During Prohibition, it became a haven for drinkers who could boat across from the dry United States to the wet Canadian side just yards away. The community maintains the only American post office that depends entirely on a foreign country for its mail delivery route. Marina owners watch as killer whales pass through Boundary Bay, following salmon runs that know no political borders, while bald eagles nest in trees that could belong to either nation depending on which map you consult. The San Andreas Fault marks where 2 worlds meet and grind past each other at the pace of growing fingernails. This 800-mile scar across California moves about 2 inches each year, the Pacific Plate sliding northwest, while the North American Plate heads southeast, carrying Los Angeles toward San Francisco in a journey measured in geological time. In 15 million years, the 2 cities will be neighbors, though neither will exist in any form we would recognize. The fault isn't a single crack, but a complex zone of fractures, some sections locked in place building tension for centuries, others creeping constantly in a phenomenon called aseismic slip. In Parkfield, California, known as the earthquake capital of the world, the fault produces a magnitude 6 earthquake roughly every 22 years, with such regularity that scientists have permanently installed hundreds of instruments to catch the next one. The fault has created California's coast ranges, pushing up mountains from what was once seafloor, leaving marine fossils high in peaks that have never known the ocean in human memory. Strange phenomena occur along the fault: streams that turn at right angles, valleys that slice straight through mountain ranges, and matching rock formations that are now hundreds of miles apart. In the red rock country of Utah stands Rainbow Bridge, a natural arch so massive that the United States Capitol building could fit beneath it. This sandstone span stretches 275 feet across space, rising 290 feet from the canyon floor, carved by a patient creek that once meandered across this landscape when it was much higher. The bridge formed through millions of years of erosion as Bridge Creek wound through the sandstone, eventually cutting through a fin of rock and abandoning its old channel for a shorter path. The abandoned meander became a window in the rock that expanded over time through freeze-thaw cycles and wind erosion. The Navajo consider this sacred, calling it Nonnesoshi, meaning rainbow turned to stone, and traditionally avoided walking beneath it. The rock itself tells a story in its layers. Ancient sand dunes turned to stone, their cross-bedding still visible in the cliff faces, recording wind directions from the Jurassic period. The bridge changes color throughout the day, glowing gold at sunrise, burning red at noon, and turning purple in the evening shadows. Recent controversies arose when Lake Powell's rising waters threatened to submerge the base of the bridge, though drought has since lowered the lake levels. Alaska's landscape holds more water in its frozen lakes than most countries hold in all forms. 3 million lakes larger than 20 acres dot the state, remnants of glacial activity from the last ice age when massive ice sheets scraped and gouged the land. These kettle lakes formed when chunks of glacial ice were buried in sediment, then melted, leaving depressions that filled with water. Many remain frozen 9 months of the year, creating a seasonal rhythm where they serve as landing strips for bush planes in winter and breeding grounds for millions of waterfowl in summer. The permafrost beneath many of these lakes is thawing now, causing some to drain suddenly when the frozen seal breaks, leaving behind muddy scars called drained lake basins that eventually become meadows. Other lakes appear where none existed before, as melting permafrost creates new depressions called thermokarst lakes. The Yukon Flats alone contains more than 30,000 lakes, creating a watery maze that confuses even experienced pilots. These waters pulse with life during the brief Arctic summer. Clouds of mosquitoes so thick they can kill caribou calves through blood loss, while fish that survive the winter in a state of near-suspended animation suddenly explode into feeding frenzies. Beneath the hills of Kentucky stretches Mammoth Cave, a limestone labyrinth so vast that explorers have mapped over 420 miles of passages with no end in sight. New connections are discovered regularly, sometimes revealing chambers that have been sealed for millions of years, containing formations that exist nowhere else on Earth. The cave system formed as slightly acidic groundwater dissolved limestone layers over millions of years, creating a multi-level maze that follows the ancient positions of the water table. The longest cave system in the world by far, nearly twice as long as the second longest, Mammoth Cave connects to the Flint Ridge system through passages that cave divers risked their lives to discover. The cave maintains a constant 54 degrees Fahrenheit, creating its own weather systems where warm surface air meets cool cave air, generating winds that early explorers used to navigate by holding candles and following the flame's direction. Some passages are so vast that early tourists rode boats on underground rivers by torchlight, while others require crawling through spaces barely large enough for a human body. The cave ecosystem supports over 130 species found nowhere else, including blind fish that have evolved without eyes and albino spiders that will never know sunlight. Rhode Island could disappear into Alaska 425 times over, yet this smallest state contains more history per square mile than almost anywhere in America. The entire state covers just 1,200 square miles, smaller than many individual ranches in Texas, yet it has over 400 miles of coastline thanks to Narragansett Bay's intricate geometry. The bay itself formed from glacial meltwater that carved deep channels, creating a drowned river valley that reaches 25 miles inland. Despite its tiny size, Rhode Island experiences dramatic geographic diversity: sandy barrier beaches, rocky headlands, salt marshes, and forested hills all within an hour's drive. Block Island, sitting 12 miles offshore, wasn't always an island. 10,000 years ago, you could walk there from the mainland across a land bridge now submerged under rising seas. The state's geography has been shaped more by human hands than perhaps any other. Mills, powered by countless small rivers, kick-started America's Industrial Revolution, permanently altering watersheds. The famous Newport mansions sit on cliffs that are slowly eroding into the Atlantic, losing about a foot of land each year to winter storms. Rising from the plains of Wyoming, Devil's Tower stands as a monument to volcanic forces we still don't fully understand. This massive column of igneous rock shoots 867 feet straight up from its base, its distinctive columnar jointing making it look like a giant bundle of stone pencils. Geologists debate its origin. Was it the neck of an ancient volcano whose softer outer layers eroded away? Or did magma intrude between rock layers and cool underground, only to be exposed as the surrounding landscape wore down? The columns formed as the molten rock cooled and contracted, creating hexagonal patterns similar to dried mud but on a gigantic scale. Native American tribes have their own explanations. The Lakota tell of giant bears clawing the rock, as they tried to reach 7 sisters who were saved by the rising tower. The tower continues to shed pieces of itself, with rockfalls occurring regularly as water seeps into cracks, freezes, and expands. Climbers who scale its faces report that the rock still moves, making creaking sounds as it expands in the heat and contracts in the cold. Prairie falcons nest in the cracks, their cries echoing off the stone, while the tower itself serves as a landmark visible for 100 miles. Lake Superior holds more water than all the other Great Lakes combined, a freshwater sea so vast it creates its own weather systems. This lake contains 3 quadrillion gallons of water, enough to flood all of North and South America to a depth of 1 foot. The lake is so large that it takes water a century to cycle through it completely. A drop of water entering at Duluth won't reach the outlet at Sault Ste. Marie for 100 years. Its deepest point plunges 1,300 feet, and the water stays so cold year-round that bodies of shipwreck victims don't decompose, but instead are preserved by the cold, a fact that has given rise to local legends about the lake never giving up its dead. The lake's massive thermal mass moderates the climate for miles inland, creating a microclimate where apple orchards thrive at latitudes where they shouldn't survive. Storm waves on Superior can reach 30 feet, large enough to snap 700-foot freighters in half, as happened to the Edmund Fitzgerald in 1975. The lake contains its own species of fish found nowhere else, evolved in isolation since the last ice age. In winter, ice caves form along the shoreline where waves have carved hollows in the rock, creating crystalline galleries. Eastern Washington bears the scars of one of Earth's most catastrophic floods. The channeled scablands were carved not over millions of years, but in a matter of days, when ice dams holding glacial Lake Missoula broke catastrophically 15,000 years ago. This wasn't a single event, but a series of floods, perhaps 40 or more, as the ice dam reformed and failed repeatedly. The floods carried 10 times the combined flow of all the world's current rivers, moving at speeds up to 65 miles per hour across the landscape. Boulders the size of houses were carried hundreds of miles, now sitting mysteriously on hilltops where no river flows today. The floodwaters carved channels hundreds of feet deep in solid basalt, creating waterfalls that retreated upstream so quickly they left no plunge pools. Giant ripple marks, some 30 feet high and hundreds of feet apart, still marked the landscape like frozen waves in stone and soil. The floods stripped away soil down to bedrock across thousands of square miles, creating a landscape so alien that NASA used it to train Apollo astronauts for the moon. When geologist J. Harlan Bretz first proposed this catastrophic flooding theory in the 1920s, he was ridiculed by a geological establishment that believed only in slow, gradual change. Off the coast of Massachusetts, Martha's Vineyard is engaged in a slow-motion migration westward. This island, formed from glacial deposits left by the retreating ice sheet, loses about 3 feet of its eastern shore to erosion each year, while gaining land on its western side through deposition. The island is essentially walking across the sea, pivoting on its axis as longshore currents redistribute its substance. The colorful cliffs of Aquinnah display layers of clay, sand, and gravel in reds, whites, and yellows, a geological rainbow that tells the story of different glacial advances. These cliffs erode so quickly that fossils of whales, giant ground sloths, and other Ice Age creatures regularly tumble onto the beach below. The island's shape has changed dramatically, even in recorded history. Old maps show peninsulas that are now islands, harbors that have filled with sand, and beaches that have disappeared entirely. During powerful storms, the ocean sometimes breaks through barrier beaches, creating new inlets that fundamentally alter the island's outline overnight. The island's movement isn't just horizontal, but vertical too. It's slowly sinking as the glacial rebound from the last ice age continues to tilt the entire east coast. Deep beneath the hills of Tennessee lies America's largest underground lake, the Lost Sea, spreading across 4.5 acres in a cavern system whose full extent remains unmapped. Divers have explored the lake's crystal-clear waters, finding passages that continue beyond the reach of their lights and air supplies, suggesting a vast underwater cave system that may connect to other caverns throughout the region. The lake maintains a constant 58 degrees year-round, its water so still that stalactites reflect perfectly in its surface, creating the illusion of columns stretching infinitely into darkness. Rainbow trout stocked in the lake decades ago have lost their color in the perpetual darkness, becoming ghostly pale shadows of their surface cousins. The cavern containing the lake was used by Confederate soldiers to mine saltpeter for gunpowder and by bootleggers during Prohibition, who appreciated its constant temperature and hidden location. Cherokee artifacts found in the cave date back 20,000 years, suggesting humans have long been drawn to this underground wonder. Tour boats now glide across waters that have never known sunlight, their lights revealing formations that took millions of years to create in absolute darkness, drip by patient drip. Mount Washington in New Hampshire holds court over weather so extreme that scientists once recorded the fastest wind speed ever measured on Earth's surface. In April of 1934, instruments at the Summit Observatory registered winds of 231 miles per hour, a record that stood for 62 years. The mountain creates its own weather through a geographic coincidence. It sits at the confluence of 3 major storm tracks, where cold air from Canada collides with warm air from the south and moisture from the Atlantic. This 6,000-foot peak experiences hurricane-force winds on average of 110 days per year, with winter temperatures that, when combined with wind chill, can reach 100 degrees below zero. The summit is shrouded in clouds about 60% of the time, creating rime ice formations that grow horizontally into the wind, building fantastic feathers of ice sometimes 6 feet long. Buildings on the summit must be chained to the bedrock to prevent them from blowing away, and the observatory crews sometimes cannot stand upright outside, instead crawling between buildings on especially violent days. Despite its modest height compared to western mountains, Mount Washington has claimed more lives than any other peak in the continental United States, earning its Abenaki name Agiokochuk, meaning home of the Great Spirit. In Yellowstone's Midway, Geyser Basin spreads the Grand Prismatic Spring, a hot spring larger than a football field and deeper than a 10-story building. The spring's rainbow colors aren't painted by minerals, but by billions of heat-loving bacteria that form living mats around the pool's edges, each species thriving at different temperatures and creating distinct color bands. The center remains a brilliant blue, too hot for any life at nearly 200 degrees Fahrenheit, where pure water scatters light like a liquid sapphire. Each minute, 560 gallons of water flow from the spring, water that fell as rain or snow perhaps 500 years ago and has been slowly percolating through underground chambers, heated by the magma chamber that lurks just 3 miles beneath. The bacterial mats change with the seasons, darker in winter when the organisms produce more chlorophyll to capture scarce sunlight, brighter in summer when carotenoids protect them from intense radiation. Steam rising from the spring creates its own microclimate, supporting plants that shouldn't exist at this elevation, while the runoff channels paint the landscape in oranges and yellows as different bacterial communities colonize the cooling water. From above, the spring looks like Earth's eye, gazing eternally skyward. Denali, the highest peak in North America, continues its slow rise toward the heavens, growing approximately 1 millimeter taller each year as tectonic forces push it skyward. Yet even as it rises, erosion tears at its granite faces, creating a mountain in constant flux, simultaneously building and destroying itself. The mountain generates its own weather systems, so massive that it creates a gravity wave that can affect jet streams 30,000 feet above its summit. Climbers speak of the mountain as a living thing, describing how it breathes, exhaling avalanches and inhaling clouds. The peak experiences some of Earth's most extreme temperature variations, with thermometers recording minus 150 degrees Fahrenheit when wind chill is factored in. The mountain is so tall it actually experiences less atmospheric pressure at its summit than peaks of similar height in the Himalayas due to the Earth's atmospheric bulge at the equator. Indigenous Athabascan peoples called it Denali, meaning the High One, a name recently restored after a century of being called Mount McKinley. The mountain's granite heart formed 60 million years ago, far underground, slowly cooling from molten rock before being thrust skyward. The Salton Sea in California exists as a testament to human accident and nature's persistence. In 1905, irrigation engineers cut into the bank of the Colorado River to increase water flow to the Imperial Valley, but spring flooding overwhelmed their temporary gates. For 2 years, the entire Colorado River poured into the Salton Sink, a depression 227 feet below sea level. By the time engineers finally stopped the flow, they had created California's largest lake, covering 343 square miles. The sea has no outlet, causing salts and agricultural runoff to concentrate over the decades, making it saltier than the Pacific Ocean. This accidental ecosystem became a crucial stopover for millions of migrating birds on the Pacific Flyway, supporting species that had lost most of their natural wetland habitats to development. But the sea is dying now, shrinking as less agricultural runoff reaches it, concentrating toxins and salts to levels that create massive fish die-offs. The receding waters expose lakebed covered in toxic dust that blows across surrounding communities. Abandoned resorts and yacht clubs line the shores, remnants of the 1950s when developers tried to create a California Riviera before the ecological collapse began. Kansas presents a landscape so geometrically flat that scientists at Texas State University proved it is literally flatter than a pancake. Using topographical data and laser measurements, they compared the surface variation of Kansas to an IHOP pancake scaled up to the state's size, finding that Kansas would indeed be smoother. This flatness isn't monotonous, but sublime. A landscape where you can watch thunderstorms approach for hours, where the curvature of Earth becomes visible, where grain elevators serve as mountains. The state's flatness results from ancient seas that repeatedly covered the region, depositing layer after layer of sediment with mathematical precision. Yet this apparent flatness conceals subtle variations. The state actually tilts, dropping about 10 feet per mile from west to east, an incline so gentle it's imperceptible to human senses, but enough to determine which way every river flows. The Flint Hills break this flatness, though hills seems generous for rises that rarely exceed a few hundred feet. These gentle swells contain the last significant remnant of tall grass prairie, an ecosystem that once covered 170 million acres, but now exists in fragments, where grass species with roots extending 15 feet deep create a landscape that appears simple, but contains more biodiversity than many rainforests. Deep beneath Missouri, far from any tectonic plate boundary, The New Madrid seismic zone produces about 200 earthquakes each year. This shouldn't happen. Missouri sits in the middle of the North American plate, thousands of miles from where plates collide or spread. Yet here, an ancient failed rift valley, where the continent began tearing apart 600 million years ago before changing its mind, creates a zone of weakness that still shifts and groans. The earthquakes here behave differently than those in California. The solid granite bedrock of the central United States transmits seismic waves much more efficiently than the broken, jumbled rocks of the West Coast. A major earthquake here would be felt over an area 10 times larger than a similar quake in California, potentially affecting cities from Chicago to Atlanta. The zone produces a major earthquake roughly every 500 years, and the last sequence occurred in 1811 and 12, meaning the fault is loading tension for the next big release. Scientists have found evidence of ancient earthquakes in sand blows, eruptions of liquefied sand that burst through the surface during strong shaking, leaving circular deposits that dot farm fields like pockmarks from the Earth's convulsions. Shiprock rises from the New Mexico desert, like a sailing vessel frozen in stone, a volcanic neck that stands 1,583 feet above the surrounding plain. This jagged monument formed when magma solidified in the throat of an ancient volcano, becoming harder than the cone of ash and cinders around it. Over 30 million years, erosion stripped away the volcanic cone, leaving only this resistant core standing like a Gothic cathedral in the desert. Radiating from Shiprock are 6 dikes, walls of volcanic rock that filled cracks in the earth, now exposed as dark ridges extending for miles across the landscape like the roots of a stone tree. The Navajo call it Tse Bit-Ai, meaning rock with wings, and tell of a great bird that carried their ancestors to this land before turning to stone. The rock continues to erode, occasionally dropping bus-sized chunks that shatter on the talus slopes below. Climbers are now forbidden on this sacred peak, but those who scaled it before the ban described rock so fractured it would shift under their weight, making haunting sounds as pieces ground against each other. The formation is visible for 60 miles in every direction, a navigation landmark that has guided travelers for millennia. Beneath the waters of Chesapeake Bay lies evidence of a catastrophic impact from 35 million years ago. A meteorite or comet roughly 2 miles wide slammed into the shallow sea that covered this region, creating a crater 55 miles across and nearly as deep as the Grand Canyon. The impact was so powerful, it fractured bedrock in a zone larger than Connecticut, creating a bull's-eye pattern of concentric cracks that still affect groundwater flow today. The crater was buried under millions of years of sediment, hidden until oil company geologists discovered it in the 1990s while drilling exploratory wells. The impact tsunami would have been hundreds of feet tall, racing across the ancient Atlantic and scouring coastlines from North Carolina to New Jersey. The crater's presence explains many of the bay's characteristics: why it has so many tributaries, why the surrounding land is slowly sinking, why the groundwater is salty in places where it shouldn't be. The buried crater continues to compact, causing the land above to subside about 1 millimeter per year, contributing to the relative sea level rise that threatens communities around the bay. Ships pass daily over this hidden catastrophe, their keels floating above millions of years of buried violence. Mauna Kea on Hawaii's Big Island presents a paradox, a tropical mountain whose summit knows winter. When measured from its base on the ocean floor, this volcanic peak stands over 33,000 feet tall, making it taller than Everest by more than 4,000 feet. Yet most of this mountain lies hidden beneath Pacific waters, with only its top 13,800 feet emerging into air. The summit receives snow every winter, creating the surreal sight of snowboarders carving turns while looking out at tropical beaches far below. The mountain's height and isolation from continental light pollution make its summit one of Earth's premier astronomical observation sites, where telescopes peer into space through some of the clearest, driest air on the planet. Ancient Hawaiians quarried dense basalt from specific sites on the mountain to make their finest tools, while Lake Waiau near the summit, one of the highest lakes in the United States, was sacred for its supposed healing powers. The lake exists in a depression lined with clay from weathered volcanic ash, creating an impermeable layer that holds snowmelt at nearly 14,000 feet elevation. The mountain is considered dormant rather than extinct, last erupting about 4,500 years ago. The driftless area spreads across parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois, a region that mysteriously escaped the grinding glaciers that flattened everything around it. While ice sheets up to 2 miles thick scoured the surrounding landscape repeatedly over the past 2 million years, this 24,000 square mile region remained untouched, preserving landscapes that predate the ice ages. Here, rivers still follow courses they carved millions of years ago, creating deeply incised valleys unlike anything in the glaciated Midwest. The region's name comes from the absence of glacial drift, the rocks, gravel, and soil that glaciers usually leave behind. Instead, the driftless area maintains its ancient topography of steep hills, narrow ridges, and V-shaped valleys that look more like Appalachia than the Midwest. Some scientists theorize that the highlands to the north diverted glacial ice around this region like water around a stone, while others suggest the area's unique bedrock somehow resisted glacial erosion. The landscape preserves species that survived here, while ice destroyed their habitat elsewhere, creating pockets of biodiversity called refugia. Caves in the region contain fossils of Ice Age animals that lived here while glaciers covered lands just miles away. Tornado Alley doesn't stay in one place, but migrates with the seasons like a predator following prey. In March, the violent storms concentrate along the Gulf Coast from Texas to Florida, where warm, moist air from the Gulf meets cold fronts pushing south. By April, the action shifts to the southern plains, Oklahoma, Kansas, and northern Texas, where the clash of air masses creates the most violent tornadoes on Earth. May pushes the tornado zone into the central plains, while June finds it in the northern plains and upper Midwest. This migration follows the sun's northward journey and the jet stream's seasonal shift, creating a predictable pattern of destruction that communities have learned to anticipate. The geography of the Great Plains creates perfect conditions for these storms, no mountains to disrupt airflow, allowing cold, dry air from Canada to collide with warm, moist air from the Gulf in spectacular fashion. Some locations experience tornado seasons twice yearly as the zone passes north in spring and returns south in fall. More, Oklahoma has been struck by major tornadoes so frequently that some residents have been through multiple F4 or F5 tornadoes in their lifetimes, rebuilding on the same spot each time. The Olympic Peninsula creates one of the most dramatic rain shadows in North America, where locations just 50 miles apart experience rainfall differences of over 120 inches per year. The western slopes intercept Pacific storms, forcing moisture-laden air up and over the Olympic Mountains, wringing out over 140 inches of rain annually in the Hoh rainforest. This creates a temperate rainforest where Sitka spruce and western hemlock grow to enormous proportions, draped in moss that hangs like ancient curtains. Roosevelt elk wade through sword ferns that grow head-high, while the forest floor stays so perpetually damp that fallen trees become nurse logs, supporting rows of new trees that grow from their decaying bodies. But just 50 miles east, in the town of Sequim, annual rainfall drops to less than 20 inches, drier than Los Angeles. This rain shadow effect is so pronounced that cacti grow naturally within sight of glaciers. The mountains create their own weather systems, with clouds forming on the windward side and dissipating on the leeward, a daily cycle visible from space. The contrast is so sharp that you can drive from rainforest to near desert conditions in less than 2 hours. Antelope Canyon, near Page, Arizona, exists as a testament to the patient work of flash floods carving through Navajo sandstone. This slot canyon, in places only 3 feet wide but 120 feet deep, was carved by waters that race through perhaps once or twice a year, carrying sand and debris that act like liquid sandpaper. The canyon consists of 2 separate sections, upper and lower, each with its own personality shaped by slightly different flood patterns. Light enters the narrow slots only when the sun is nearly overhead, creating the famous light beams that seem solid enough to climb. These beams are actually made visible by fine sand particles suspended in the air, stirred up by the convection currents created by temperature differences between the cool canyon floor and warm air above. The canyon walls display flowing shapes that seem more liquid than stone, carved into forms that defy geology's typically angular vocabulary. Flash floods still actively shape the canyon, sometimes filling it to the rim in minutes with a churning mass of water, mud, and debris. The Navajo name for Upper Antelope Canyon translates to the place where water runs through rocks, an understated description for one of Earth's most otherworldly landscapes. The Great Lakes collectively contain 84% of North America's surface fresh water and 21% of the entire world's supply, a concentration of fresh water unmatched anywhere on Earth. If spread evenly across the continental United States, this water would submerge the entire country under 10 feet. These lakes are young in geological terms, formed only about 14,000 years ago as the last ice age ended, yet they contain some of the oldest water on Earth. Some deep waters in Lake Superior haven't mixed with surface waters for centuries. The lakes create their own weather patterns, producing lake effect snow that can dump several feet in hours on downwind shores. They're so large that they experience tides, though only about 2 inches, and seiches, standing waves that can cause water levels to change by several feet in minutes as water sloshes from one end of a lake to the other. The lakes moderate the climate for hundreds of miles inland, allowing fruit orchards and vineyards to thrive at latitudes where they would normally freeze. Ships traversing these waters must navigate like ocean vessels, dealing with waves, storms, and even rogue waves that appear from nowhere. Cadillac Mountain on Maine's Mount Desert Island holds the distinction of being the first place in the United States to greet the sunrise from October through March. At just 1,530 feet, it's not particularly tall, but its position on the easternmost land along the East Coast gives it this temporal privilege. Each dawn from fall through winter, the sun's rays touch Cadillac's pink granite summit about 5 minutes before anywhere else in the nation, making it a pilgrimage site for those who want to be the first to see each new day. The mountain is part of an ancient volcanic field that was active 420 million years ago, when this region resembled today's Mount St. Helens. The granite that forms the mountain cooled slowly underground, developing large crystals of pink feldspar that give the rock its distinctive color. Glaciers sculpted the mountain's current form, carving smooth slopes on one side and plucking steep cliffs on the other. while leaving behind erratic boulders balanced improbably on bare ledges. The view from the summit encompasses the scattered islands of Frenchman Bay, looking like broken pieces of a granite puzzle that might once have fit together. Beneath 8 Great Plains states lies the Ogallala Aquifer, an underground reservoir that holds more water than Lake Huron, trapped in layers of sand and gravel deposited by streams flowing from the Rocky Mountains millions of years ago. This fossil water, some of it 20,000 years old, has transformed the Great Plains from semi-arid grassland into one of the world's most productive agricultural regions. The aquifer underlies about 174,000 square miles, but it's not a uniform underground lake. Rather, it exists in the spaces between sand and gravel particles, like water in a sponge. In some places, the aquifer is over 1,000 feet thick, while in others, it has already been pumped dry. The water is being withdrawn at rates far exceeding natural recharge. Some areas drop by 2 feet per year, and once depleted, the aquifer would take thousands of years to refill naturally. Farmers drill wells over 1,000 feet deep to reach the dropping water table, and satellite images show crop circles scattered across the landscape like green coins on a brown table, each circle marking an irrigation pivot, tapping this ancient resource. The aquifer's depletion is visible from space as brown patches spreading across once green fields. Block Island, 12 miles off Rhode Island's coast, loses about 15 feet of its shoreline each year to erosion, while simultaneously growing in other directions as ocean currents redistribute its substance. The island is essentially a pile of glacial till, unsorted rocks, sand, and clay dropped by melting ice, sitting vulnerably in the path of Atlantic storms. Every nor'easter rearranges the island's outline, sometimes dramatically. The famous Southeast Lighthouse had to be moved back from the eroding bluffs in 1993, lifted whole, and rolled inland on rails. The island's Mohegan Bluffs drop 200 feet to the beach below, exposing layers of different glacial deposits like a cross-section through time. These cliffs erode in sudden collapses rather than gradually, occasionally dropping house-sized chunks onto the beach without warning. Fresh water exists on the island only as a thin lens floating on top of denser salt water that saturates the ground below, making every well a delicate balance between drawing too much and letting salt water intrude. The island serves as a waypoint for millions of migrating birds who arrive exhausted from their ocean crossing, sometimes carpeting the ground in such numbers that early settlers reported being able to catch them by hand. Every evening from March through October, Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico witnesses one of nature's great spectacles as 400,000 Mexican free-tailed bats spiral out of the cave's natural entrance. The bats exit in a counterclockwise vortex that can be detected on weather radar, looking like a storm cell emerging from the desert floor. They disperse across the landscape to hunt insects, each bat consuming up to half its body weight in moths, beetles, and other night-flying insects, providing millions of dollars worth of pest control for area farmers. The colony's guano once accumulated in the cave to depths of 40 feet, mined in the early 1900s for fertilizer and gunpowder production. The bats navigate through the cave's complete darkness using echolocation so precise they can detect wires thinner than human hair while flying at speeds up to 60 miles per hour. In autumn, the bats migrate to Mexico, leaving the cave silent until their return in spring, their timing so reliable that their arrival has been documented within the same week for over a century. The cave's constant temperature of 56 degrees provides perfect conditions for the maternity colony, where mothers somehow find their own pups among millions of others. The Yellowstone caldera spans 34 by 45 miles, marking where a supervolcano has erupted catastrophically 3 times in the past 2.1 million years. This caldera isn't clearly visible as a crater because it's so large that its rim appears as distant mountain ranges, and because subsequent lava flows have partially filled it. The magma chamber beneath feeds over 10,000 geothermal features, more than exist in all the rest of the world combined. The ground here breathes, rising and falling by inches or sometimes feet as magma moves below, while earthquakes occur daily, mostly too small to feel. The last super eruption, 640,000 years ago, ejected 240 cubic miles of material, covering much of North America in ash and causing a volcanic winter that likely lasted years. The volcano remains very much alive. GPS stations measure ground deformation in real time, seismometers track earthquake swarms, and thermal sensors monitor the temperature of hot springs that could signal changes in the system below. Yet the caldera's activity follows patterns. Areas of uplift that cause concern often subside again, the system seeming to inhale and exhale over years or decades rather than building toward eruption. Isle Royale in Lake Superior hosts the world's longest-running predator-prey study, where wolves and moose have been observed continuously since 1958. This island, 45 miles long and 9 miles wide, provides a nearly perfect natural laboratory, large enough to support populations of both species, but isolated enough that immigration and emigration are rare. The moose arrived around 1900, probably swimming from the mainland, while wolves crossed on ice during a particularly cold winter around 1949. Their populations cycle in fascinating patterns. When moose numbers rise, wolves increase in response, but with a delay of several years. Then, as wolf numbers peak, moose decline, followed eventually by a wolf decline, and the cycle repeats. But the story is more complex than simple predator-prey dynamics. Harsh winters, tick infestations, and the genetic health of the wolf population all play crucial roles. The island's wolves have become severely inbred, at times dropping to just 2 individuals, leading to genetic rescue efforts. Meanwhile, the moose browse has transformed the island's forests, creating a landscape shaped by the appetite of these massive herbivores. High in the Rocky Mountains, the Burgess Shale holds creatures from an alien world that happens to be our own planet, 505 million years ago. These fossils preserve soft-bodied animals in such exquisite detail that scientists can see their last meals, their muscle fibers, even the contents of their guts. The creatures themselves seem drawn from fever dreams. Opabinia with its 5 eyes and vacuum cleaner trunk, Hallucigenia with spines on its back and tentacles beneath, Anomalocaris, a shrimp-like predator the size of a coffee table. These rocks were once muddy seafloor near the equator, where underwater avalanches periodically buried entire communities of animals, preserving them in an oxygen-free tomb that prevented decay. The mountains lifted these ancient seas to over 8,000 feet elevation, where they now rest in layers of shale that split like pages in a book, each one potentially revealing creatures that existed before bones, before shells, before any of the protective hard parts that usually fossilize. The site has revealed more about the Cambrian explosion, when complex life suddenly diversified, than any other location on Earth. Park rangers now strictly control access, as each fossil removed is a page torn from the only record of this crucial chapter in life's story. Niagara Falls retreats upstream at about 1 foot per year. a geological sprint that has moved the falls 7 miles from where they began 12,000 years ago. The falling water undermines the soft shale beneath the hard limestone caprock, causing periodic collapses that move the falls inland in sudden lurches rather than smooth retreat. At this rate, the falls will disappear entirely in about 50,000 years when they reach Lake Erie and become merely rapids. The Niagara River is young, formed only after the last ice age when the newly created Great Lakes found their outlet to the sea. Before humans began diverting water for power generation, the falls retreated even faster, up to 6 feet per year. The horseshoe shape of the Canadian Falls isn't aesthetic, but functional. It distributes the enormous force of water across a wider crest, slowing erosion. Wintertime creates ice bridges below the falls that once allowed people to walk across before several deaths ended the practice. The constant mist creates a permanent rainbow on sunny days, always in the same position relative to the sun, while in winter, the mist freezes on nearby trees, creating an ice-encased forest that looks like crystallized time. In the Mojave Desert's Devil's Hole lives the world's most isolated fish, the Devil's Hole pupfish, existing in a single pool that could fit in most living rooms. This limestone cavern, filled with 93-degree water, descends to unknown depths. Divers have reached 500 feet without finding the bottom. The entire pupfish population, usually fewer than 200 individuals, lives primarily on a shallow shelf near the surface about the size of a kitchen table. These inch-long fish have survived in this single location for somewhere between 10 and 20,000 years, since the desert was much wetter. They've evolved to live in conditions that would kill most fish: water low in oxygen, high in temperature, with barely enough food to sustain them. The fish spawn on the shallow shelf, timing their reproduction to when the sun angle allows brief periods of sunlight to reach the shelf, triggering algae growth. Scientists consider them the most vulnerable vertebrate on Earth. A single catastrophic event could extinct the entire species in minutes. The water level in Devil's Hole mysteriously responds to earthquakes thousands of miles away, sloshing in response to seismic waves from Japan, Chile, or Alaska. California's redwood forests perform their own magic trick, pulling water from thin air to survive the dry summers. These tallest trees on Earth, reaching nearly 400 feet skyward, face a biological challenge, pumping water from roots to crown against gravity's relentless pull. The trees solve this partially by harvesting fog, their needle-covered branches acting like nets that capture moisture from the marine layer that rolls in from the Pacific. On foggy mornings, you can stand beneath a redwood in bright sunshine while experiencing rain as captured fog drips from branches high above. This fog drip can add 10 inches of precipitation yearly to the forest floor, creating a microclimate that supports ferns, sorrel, and salamanders through the rainless summer months. The trees communicate through fungal networks connecting their roots, sharing nutrients and chemical signals across the forest. When a redwood falls, it often doesn't die but sends up clone sprouts from its roots, creating circles of younger trees around the parent's corpse called fairy rings. Some of these clonal colonies have been reproducing this way for thousands of years, the same genetic individuals surviving through countless iterations. Monument Valley's monolithic buttes stand like ancient sentinels on the Arizona-Utah border, remnants of sandstone layers that once covered the entire region. These formations rise up to 1,000 feet from the valley floor, their flat tops marking the level of the original rock layers before millions of years of erosion carried away everything else. The buttes glow different colors throughout the day: purple at dawn, blazing orange at noon, deep red at sunset, as iron oxide in the sandstone responds to changing light. Each formation has a name given by the Navajo who consider this sacred land. The Mittens, with their distinctive thumb-like projections, the three sisters huddled together, the totem pole standing impossibly thin and tall. The rock layers tell a story of ancient environments, sand dunes turned to stone, river channels cutting through, shallow seas leaving limestone caps. Wind and water continue sculpting these monuments, grain by grain, with rockfalls occasionally changing their profiles overnight. The valley floor isn't static either. It's covered in sand and silt that shifts with every storm, sometimes revealing and sometimes burying archaeological sites that date back thousands of years. The Flint Hills of Kansas preserve the last significant remnant of the tallgrass prairie that once covered 170 million acres of North America. Now reduced to just 4% of its original extent, this ecosystem exists here because the shallow, rocky soil made the land unsuitable for plowing, saving it from conversion to farmland. The grass isn't just on the surface. Some prairie plants send roots down 15 feet, with 90% of the biomass existing underground. This hidden architecture makes the prairie incredibly resilient to drought and fire. In fact, fire is essential here. The ranchers burn the hills every spring, a practice that mimics lightning-caused fires that maintained the prairie for millennia. After a burn, the hills appear black and lifeless, but within weeks they explode in green, the deep roots sending up fresh growth enriched by the ash. Over 200 species of grasses and wildflowers create waves of color through the seasons, while the hills themselves aren't hills at all, but the eroded remnants of ancient limestone layers, creating a stepped landscape that from a distance looks like a green sea frozen in stone. Lake Tahoe holds water so pure and clear that a white dinner plate would remain visible 75 feet below the surface, though this clarity is actually a sign of an ecosystem in trouble. The lake's famous blue comes from its ultra-pure water, with so few particles to scatter light. Only the shortest blue wavelengths reflect back to our eyes. This alpine lake, sitting at 6,200 feet elevation, contains enough water to cover all of California 14 inches deep. The lake is so deep, over 1,600 feet, that if it were drained, the Empire State Building could stand on the bottom with its tip still 300 feet underwater. Despite surface temperatures that can reach 68 degrees in summer, the deep waters remain at a constant 39 degrees year-round, too cold for bodies to decompose. Legends persist of perfectly preserved victims from the 19th century floating in the depths. The lake never freezes due to its size and depth, though ice shelves form along the shores. The water is so pure it's almost distilled, containing fewer dissolved minerals than most bottled water. This purity, while beautiful, means the lake has very little nutrients to support life. The Aleutian Islands arc 1,200 miles from Alaska toward Russia, a chain of volcanic islands that forms the northern edge of the Ring of Fire. This archipelago crosses the 180th meridian, making it both the westernmost and easternmost point in the United States, a geographic paradox that exists only on maps. The islands experience some of Earth's worst weather, with storms generating hurricane-force winds, horizontal rain, and fog so thick that visibility drops to zero. The meeting of the warm Japanese current and the cold Bering Sea creates almost permanent fog, with some locations recording sunshine fewer than 10 days per year. These volcanic islands are still growing. New ones occasionally emerge from the sea, while others slowly subside back beneath the waves. During World War II, This was the only part of North America occupied by foreign forces when Japan captured Attu and Kiska Islands. The islands form a bridge that allowed humans to first enter the Americas, though that land bridge now lies drowned beneath the Bering Sea. Volcanic eruptions are common, with ash clouds regularly forcing trans-Pacific flights to reroute. Meteor Crater in Arizona preserves the violence of 50,000 years ago almost perfectly in the dry desert air. The iron meteorite that created this hole was only about 150 feet across, but was traveling at 26,000 miles per hour when it hit, releasing energy equivalent to 20 million tons of TNT. The explosion excavated 175 million tons of rock, flipping the rock layers at the rim so that older rocks now lie on top of younger ones. The crater spans nearly a mile across and plunges 550 feet deep, its floor covered with shattered rock and meteorite fragments. The impact was so violent, it created minerals that only form under extreme pressure, including microscopic diamonds. For years, miners searched for the main mass of the meteorite, not understanding that it had largely vaporized on impact. The crater's shape has barely changed since formation. Erosion in this desert climate progresses so slowly that the crater will last millions of years. NASA used this crater to train Apollo astronauts, recognizing its similarity to lunar craters. Standing at the rim, you can see the curvature of the impact, the violence frozen in stone. The Pine Barrens of New Jersey seem misnamed. This million-acre forest in America's most densely populated state contains not just pines, but a complex ecosystem sitting atop an aquifer containing 17 trillion gallons of pristine water. The water is so pure it's actually tea-colored, stained by tannins from cedar and pine, but containing virtually no dissolved minerals. The sandy, acidic soil creates conditions where few plants can thrive, but those that do exist nowhere else. Carnivorous plants supplement the poor soil by catching insects, while rare orchids bloom in secret bogs. The forest has burned regularly for thousands of years, creating a fire-adapted ecosystem where pitch pines resprout from their roots after burning and hold their cones closed until fire's heat releases the seeds. Despite being surrounded by millions of people, the Pine Barrens remain largely wild, protected by soil too poor for farming and water regulations that limit development. Local legends speak of the Jersey Devil, a creature supposedly born here in the 18th century, though the real mysteries are ecological. How such a large tract of wilderness persists in the heart of the megalopolis. Mount St. Helens lost 1,314 feet of elevation in a matter of minutes on May 18, 1980, transforming from America's 5th highest peak to its 35th in the largest landslide in recorded history. The entire north face of the mountain collapsed when a magnitude 5 earthquake triggered the failure of the bulging, unstable slope. This landslide released pressure on the superheated groundwater and magma below, causing a lateral blast that flattened forests up to 19 miles away. Trees were snapped like matchsticks, all pointing away from the volcano, creating patterns still visible today. The blast cloud was so hot it melted cars and vaporized entire trees, leaving only holes in the ground where roots had been. Within the crater, a new lava dome has been growing, already rising over 1,000 feet, rebuilding the mountain from within. Life returned to the blast zone faster than scientists expected. Pocket gophers survived underground and brought up nutrient-rich soil. Elk wandered in from surrounding areas, and wind-blown seeds found purchase in the ash. Spirit Lake, once a pristine alpine lake, was partially filled by the landslide and still contains thousands of floating logs from the destroyed forest. The Four Corners Monument marks the only place in the United States where 4 states meet at a single point though the monument is actually about 1,800 feet east of where it should be according to modern GPS. This surveying error from the 1860s has been legally accepted, making the monument the official corner, regardless of its geographic incorrectness. The point sits on the Colorado Plateau, a region that has remained remarkably stable while mountains rose around it, preserving rock layers in their original horizontal positions. Standing at the monument, you can be in Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico simultaneously. 4 different state legal systems, time zones, depending on daylight saving observance, and cultural regions meeting at a brass disc. The area around Four Corners contains the highest concentration of Native American lands in the country, with the Navajo Nation surrounding the monument and the Ute, Hopi, and Zuni nations nearby. The high desert environment here creates temperature swings of 50 degrees between day and night, while the clear air allows visibility for over 100 miles in every direction. The Outer Banks of North Carolina migrate westward about 5 feet each year, barrier islands rolling over themselves in a process called island rollover. These ribbons of sand shouldn't exist according to some models. They're too low, too narrow, and face storms too powerful. Yet they persist by moving, letting storm waves wash completely over them, depositing ocean sand on their backside. This process means the island's ocean-facing beaches are always young, constantly renewed, while their sound-side marshes contain remnants of ancient forests that once stood on what was then the ocean side. The islands are littered with shipwrecks. Over 5,000 vessels have foundered in these waters, earning the nickname Graveyard of the Atlantic. The wrecks create artificial reefs that alter wave patterns, which in turn affects how sand moves along the shore. Oregon Inlet, cut by a hurricane in 1846, migrates south at about 100 feet per year, forcing regular dredging to keep it navigable. These islands protect the mainland from storm surge, but at their own expense. Every major hurricane reshapes them, sometimes cutting new inlets or closing old ones overnight. Onondaga Cave in Missouri maintains a constant 57 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, its temperature so stable that early settlers used caves like this as natural refrigerators. The cave's formations grow at geological pace, stalactites adding perhaps an inch per century as mineral-rich water deposits microscopic layers of calcite. The cave contains formations called lily pads, circular deposits that form in still pools, growing outward like stone flowers on the water's surface. These are so rare that only a few caves worldwide contain them. The cave's river appears and disappears through the limestone, flowing through passages too small for humans before emerging in massive rooms where the ceiling disappears in darkness. Blind cavefish swim in the underground streams, their ancestors having entered the cave system so long ago that evolution has removed their unnecessary eyes. The cave breathes with barometric pressure changes, air flowing in or out depending on whether pressure is higher inside or outside. Early explorers navigated by following these air currents, knowing that air flowing meant a connection to the surface somewhere ahead. The Columbia River Gorge creates a wind tunnel effect unique in North America, where pressure differences between the coast and interior funnel air through the only sea-level passage in the Cascade Mountains. Winds regularly exceed 35 miles per hour, with gusts over 100 miles per hour recorded during winter storms. This wind has carved the gorge's distinctive shape, wider at both ends, narrower in the middle, like an hourglass laid on its side. The constant wind supports a world-class windsurfing scene, but also creates extreme fire danger, able to transform a small spark into a conflagration in minutes. The gorge displays remarkable climate diversity. The western entrance receives over 75 inches of rain yearly, while locations just 30 miles east get less than 15 inches. This dramatic transition creates multiple ecosystems in a compressed space, from temperate rainforest to oak savanna to shrub steppe. Waterfalls pour from the cliffs, including Multnomah Falls, which drops 620 feet in 2 tiers. The gorge formed through a combination of volcanic uplift and the Missoula floods, catastrophic Ice Age floods that carved the channel deeper. Hot Springs National Park in Arkansas sits atop an unusual geological plumbing system where rainwater takes a 4,000-year journey before emerging at 143 degrees. The water begins as rain on the surrounding hills, percolating through fractures in the sandstone and novaculite, descending nearly 8,000 feet where Earth's heat warms it, then rising through fault lines to emerge in 47 springs along the western slope of Hot Springs Mountain. The water carries virtually no sulfur, making it odorless unlike most hot springs, and emerges sterile, too hot for bacteria to survive. Native Americans considered this neutral ground where hostile tribes could gather peacefully to use the healing waters. The springs once flowed freely over colorful tufa terraces, but early development captured them in pipes and pools, though recent restoration has returned some springs to their natural state. The consistent flow and temperature suggest a vast reservoir of heated water below, estimated at over 1 million gallons emerging daily. The surrounding novaculite, a rock so pure it's almost entirely silica, was prized by Native Americans for tool making and traded across the continent. The Black Hills of South Dakota rise from the Great Plains like a dark island, their pine-covered slopes appearing black from a distance, giving them their name. These aren't hills, but an isolated mountain range, pushed up 70 million years ago, when forces deep within Earth created a dome of rock that subsequent erosion carved into the current landscape. The uplift exposed rocks ranging from 2-billion-year-old granite in the center to recent sediments on the flanks, a geological layer cake turned inside out. The hills create their own climate, catching moisture that would otherwise pass over the dry plains, supporting forests in a sea of grass. Gold, discovered here in the 1870s, led to conflicts that still resonate, as the hills remain sacred to the Lakota, who call them Paha Sapa, the heart of everything that is. The geometry of the uplift created radial drainage patterns, with streams flowing outward like spokes on a wheel. Caves riddle the limestone layers, including Jewel Cave and Wind Cave, 2 of the world's longest cave systems. The granite peaks at the center, including Mount Rushmore, erode so slowly they'll last millions of years. Assateague Island, spanning the Maryland-Virginia border, hosts wild ponies that have roamed here for centuries, their origins lost to legend. Some say they swam ashore from a shipwrecked Spanish galleon, others that colonists left them to avoid taxes on livestock. These aren't technically ponies, but horses stunted by their harsh environment, limited fresh water, poor quality marsh grass, and brutal storms. They've adapted to drink brackish water and eat plants other horses won't touch. The Maryland herd is managed by the National Park Service, while Virginia's ponies belong to the Chincoteague Volunteer Fire Department, which funds itself through an annual swim where ponies are herded across the channel to Chincoteague for auction. The island itself migrates westward as storms erode the ocean's side and deposit sand on the bay side, a process accelerated by rising seas. Ghost forests of dead pines and cedars stand in the surf zone, killed by saltwater intrusion, their skeletal remains marking where the island's interior once lay. The island would have migrated faster, but jetties built to protect Ocean City have interrupted the natural sand flow. Idaho's Snake River Canyon plunges deeper than the Grand Canyon in places, reaching 7,900 feet below the rim at its deepest point near Hell's Canyon. Unlike the layered sedimentary rocks of the Grand Canyon, the Snake River cuts through successive basalt lava flows, creating a canyon that's narrow, steep, and dark. The river here is older than the canyon. It maintained its course while volcanic eruptions tried to dam it, cutting through each new lava flow before it could permanently block the water. Springs burst from the canyon walls where the river cuts through aquifer-bearing rock layers, some discharging volumes that would be considered major rivers anywhere else. The canyon creates extreme microclimates. The rim might have snow, while the bottom bakes in 100-degree heat, a temperature difference that can exceed 40 degrees. Ancient pictographs on the canyon walls record human presence dating back 15,000 years. The canyon continues to deepen, though slowly. The hard basalt resists erosion, except during extreme floods that can move car-sized boulders. Mono Lake in California has survived 3 times longer than most lakes, persisting for over 760,000 years in a basin with no outlet. The lake is 3 times saltier than the ocean and highly alkaline, with a pH near 10, like household ammonia. These extreme conditions support a simple but productive ecosystem: algae, brine shrimp, and alkali flies that in turn feed millions of migrating birds. The flies create such dense clouds that early travelers reported having to cover their faces to breathe. Tufa towers, limestone formations created where freshwater springs entered the alkaline lake, stand like Gothic spires along the shoreline, exposed when water diversions lowered the lake level. These formations only grow underwater, so their current exposure tells the story of the lake's decline. The lake sits in a volcanic field. Pauha Island in the center formed from a volcanic eruption just 300 years ago, while the entire basin continues to bulge from magma movement below. During calm conditions, the lake becomes a perfect mirror, doubling the Sierra Nevada mountains in its reflection. The Adirondack Mountains in New York defy the usual story of ancient mountains slowly wearing away, instead rising about 2 millimeters each year, growing faster than erosion can tear them down. These billion-year-old rocks, among the oldest on Earth, are experiencing a second youth as forces deep within the planet push them skyward. The mountains aren't a continuous range, but a dome, a circular uplift creating peaks that radiate outward like a crown. This uplift remains a geological mystery. Some scientists theorize a hot spot in the mantle below. Others suggest the crust is still rebounding from the weight of Ice Age glaciers. The result is a landscape of contradictions. Ancient rocks acting young, mountains that should be worn flat, still reaching for the sky. The Adirondacks contain more wilderness than Yellowstone and Everglades combined, a 6 million-acre park where loons call across lakes that fill glacial scratches in billion-year-old stone. In autumn, the mountains become a patchwork quilt of color, as hardwood forests turn gold and crimson against the dark green of conifers. The rocks themselves tell stories of when this region was the floor of an ancient ocean, then the heart of a supercontinent. Their minerals formed under pressures that turned carbon to graphite, just one step short of diamonds. Bracken Cave, near San Antonio, Texas, houses the largest concentration of mammals on Earth when 20 million Mexican free-tailed bats gather here each summer. The colony consists primarily of mothers who travel from Mexico to give birth in the cave's constant temperature chambers. Each evening, they emerge in a living tornado that spirals into the sky, a column so dense it appears on weather radar as a storm system. The sound of 40 million wings creates a roar like a waterfall, while the ammonia smell from accumulated guano can be detected a mile away. Each bat consumes up to half its body weight in insects nightly, the colony destroying 250 tons of insects in a single night. Baby bats, called pups, cluster on the cave ceiling in densities of 500 per square foot, yet mothers returning from hunting can find their own offspring among millions through unique vocal signatures and scent. The guano below accumulates in hills 60 feet high, supporting an ecosystem of beetles, spiders, and snakes that never see daylight. During World War II, the military harvested this guano for gunpowder production. The bats navigate through total darkness at speeds reaching 60 miles per hour, their echolocation so precise they can detect human hair in flight. The Red River between Texas and Oklahoma earned part of its reputation from a peculiar behavior. During severe floods, it can actually flow backward. The phenomenon occurs when tributary flooding creates such pressure that it forces the main channel to reverse, sending water upstream, sometimes for dozens of miles. The river already runs an unusual course, flowing east along the Texas-Oklahoma border, when most rivers in the region flow south. Its red color comes from iron-rich sediments washed from the Permian red beds it cuts through, earning various names throughout history, including Rio Rojo and the Spanish Rio Roxo. The riverbed constantly shifts, moving the state border with it, creating legal disputes over which state owns newly formed land. Oil wells drilled on one side have sometimes ended up on the other after floods. Quicksand forms readily in the riverbed, a mixture of fine sand and water that can swallow vehicles. The river's salt content increases dramatically as it flows through ancient seabeds, making it increasingly inhospitable to life downstream. During droughts, parts of the river disappear entirely into underground channels, re-emerging miles downstream. Native Americans called it the river that runs upside down, perhaps observing its occasional reversals. Zion National Park's Virgin River has carved through Navajo sandstone at a rate that seems impossible, 1,300 feet of vertical canyon for every million years of cutting. This small river, often just ankle deep, has sliced a gorge 2,000 feet deep and so narrow in places that you can touch both walls simultaneously. The secret lies in the river's cargo: sand and rocks that act like liquid sandpaper during flash floods, when the river transforms into a grinding machine carrying boulders like marbles. The sandstone itself helps, being relatively soft and composed of ancient sand dunes turned to stone, their cross-bedding still visible in the canyon walls as diagonal lines recording wind directions from the Jurassic. The canyon continues to deepen faster than it widens, creating the slot canyons that require wading through the river itself to explore. Hanging gardens cling to the canyon walls, where water seeps through the rock, supporting ferns and columbines in the desert. The rock appears to glow from within as iron oxide creates a palette from white through pink to deep crimson. Flash floods remain the sculptor here, sometimes deepening the canyon floor by several feet in a single event. The Connecticut River Valley holds the ghost of what might have been, a rift valley that began splitting North America apart 200 million years ago, before mysteriously stopping. Had it continued, New England might have drifted away like Madagascar from Africa, creating an ocean where now flows a river. The failed rift left behind a valley filled with distinctive brownstone, the same rock that built Manhattan's famous brownstone houses, formed from sediments that accumulated in the ancient rift lakes. Dinosaur tracks pepper these rocks, so numerous that they were used as building stones before anyone knew what they were, placing prehistoric footprints in foundations and garden walls. The valley creates a climate island, warmer and more fertile than the surrounding highlands, supporting agriculture at latitudes where it shouldn't thrive. Basalt cliffs mark where lava poured from the rift's wounds, creating the Metacomet Ridge that runs like a spine through the valley. The Connecticut River now meanders through what could have been an ocean floor, its course influenced by faults that still occasionally produce earthquakes, reminders that the earth here once tried to tear itself apart. Biscayne Bay in Florida cradles the northernmost coral reefs in the continental United States, living at the edge of possibility where winter cold fronts brush against tropical waters. These reefs exist in a delicate balance, thriving when water temperatures stay between 70 and 85 degrees, dying when cold snaps drop temperatures below their tolerance. The corals here grow more slowly than their Caribbean cousins, adding perhaps half an inch per year, building reefs that provide habitat for over 500 species of fish. The bay itself is shallow, averaging just 10 feet deep, a nursery where juvenile fish hide in seagrass meadows before venturing to deeper waters. Manatees gather here in winter, drawn to warm water springs and power plant outflows, their massive bodies graceful in the water but vulnerable to boat strikes in the shallow bay. The clear waters allow sunlight to penetrate to the bottom, supporting seagrass beds that stabilize sediments and provide food for sea turtles. Stiltsville, a collection of houses on stilts a mile offshore, stands as testament to the bay's usually calm nature, though hurricanes periodically remind residents that tropical paradise comes with tropical storms. The Palouse region of Washington and Idaho rolls in hills of windblown silt, some of the deepest soil on Earth, reaching 250 feet thick in places. These hills formed from dust storms during the ice ages, when winds picked up glacial flour, rock ground to powder by glaciers, and deposited it here in layers like snow. The hills create an ocean of land, waves of wheat and lentils that actually move in the wind like water. The soil is so fertile, it needs no fertilizer for many crops, though this same richness made it vulnerable to erosion when first plowed. Early farmers watched entire hillsides wash away in single storms before learning to follow the land's natural contours. From above, the Palouse looks like a fingerprint pressed into the earth, its whorls and ridges creating a pattern unique on the planet. Only one other place on Earth has similar Loess hills, Shanxi Province in China, where the same Ice Age winds created a mirror landscape on the other side of the Pacific. The region's beauty peaks twice yearly, emerald green in spring when crops sprout, golden in late summer before harvest. Bear Lake, straddling the Utah-Idaho border, glows Caribbean turquoise in a landscape of sagebrush and mountains, earning its nickname, Caribbean of the Rockies. The stunning color comes from limestone particles suspended in the water, so fine they remain floating, scattering light to create an almost unnatural blue. The lake harbors 4 species of fish found nowhere else on Earth, evolved in isolation since the lake formed hundreds of thousands of years ago. Local legends speak of a monster in the lake, sightings dating to the 1800s when Native Americans warned settlers about a creature that could spray water like a whale. The lake creates its own weather, generating thunderstorms that seem to appear from nowhere on clear days. In winter, the lake rarely freezes despite temperatures well below zero, its depth and dissolved minerals keeping it liquid when nearby ponds become solid ice. Raspberry shakes made from local berries have become oddly famous, drawing visitors who come for the fruit but stay mesmerized by the lake's impossible color. The lake level fluctuates dramatically. Geological evidence shows it once drained completely, leaving salt deposits before refilling again. White Sands National Park in New Mexico preserves a landscape that shouldn't exist, a desert of snow that never melts. The white dunes aren't sand, but gypsum crystals, a mineral that usually dissolves in water, surviving here only because the Tularosa Basin has no outlet to carry it away. The gypsum washes from surrounding mountains into seasonal Lake Lucero, where it crystallizes as the water evaporates, then breaks into sand-sized pieces that wind piles into dunes. These dunes stay cool to the touch even on the hottest days because gypsum doesn't absorb heat like silica sand. The dunes migrate northeast at about 30 feet per year, swallowing and uncovering plants in a slow-motion tide. Some plants have adapted to grow fast enough to stay above the sand, with roots extending down 40 feet. Animals here have evolved white coloration for camouflage: white lizards, white mice, white moths, found nowhere else. The military uses part of the dune field for missile testing, occasionally closing the park when tests occur. At sunset, the gypsum captures and reflects light, making the entire landscape glow pink and orange before fading to blue in Earth's shadow. Mount Desert Island in Maine presents a geographic anomaly on the eastern seaboard. Mountains that rise directly from the sea, the only place east of the Mississippi where this occurs. Cadillac Mountain and its granite companions were carved by glaciers that scraped away softer rock, leaving these resistant peaks standing like sentinels above the Atlantic. The island's Some Sound claims to be the only fjord on the east coast, though geologists debate whether it's deep enough to qualify. The mountains create dramatic microclimates. The summit might be shrouded in fog while beaches below bask in sunshine. The island's shape resembles a lobster claw from above, its two main lobes nearly separated by the sound. Acadia National Park preserves much of the island, where carriage roads built by John D. Rockefeller Jr. wind through forests without ever crossing automobile roads, creating a parallel transportation network from a gentler era. Thunderhole, where waves compress air in a coastal cave to create explosive sounds, demonstrates the ocean's perpetual assault on the granite coast. The island's mountains glow pink at sunrise due to their high feldspar content, the same mineral that gives many Maine buildings their distinctive color. The Edwards Aquifer beneath Texas contains underwater caves so vast that divers have found rooms large enough to hold entire buildings, with visibility exceeding 200 feet in the crystal-clear water. This limestone labyrinth formed over millions of years as slightly acidic groundwater dissolved the rock, creating a three-dimensional maze that stores water for 2 million people. Some caves penetrate over 400 feet deep, their exploration requiring specialized equipment and training as divers navigate through restrictions barely wide enough for a person before emerging into cathedral-sized chambers. The aquifer's water maintains a constant 72 degrees, supporting unique blind catfish and salamanders that have evolved in eternal darkness. Springs where the aquifer reaches the surface, like Barton Springs and Comal Springs, pump millions of gallons daily, creating oases that supported human settlement for thousands of years. The aquifer responds to rainfall with a delay. Rain today might not emerge from springs for months or years, having traveled through miles of rock. Urban development threatens this resource as parking lots and buildings prevent rain from soaking into the recharge zone, while pollutants that enter the aquifer remain trapped in the closed system. Shenandoah Valley in Virginia lies cradled between ancient ridges, its limestone floor preserving memories of tropical seas that covered this region 400 million years ago. The valley's caves contain formations that grew when this land was underwater: fossil corals, sea lily stems, and shells of creatures that would seem alien today. The limestone makes the soil exceptionally fertile, creating the breadbasket of the Confederacy during the Civil War. The valley's geometry creates a natural corridor for both armies and migrating birds, its southwest to northeast orientation funneling millions of raptors during fall migration. Massanutten Mountain splits the valley lengthwise for 50 miles, creating a valley within a valley, a geographic oddity that confused early mapmakers. The Shenandoah River flows north, unusual for rivers on the East Coast, gathering tributaries before cutting through the Blue Ridge in a water gap that predates the mountain's current height. Morning fog fills the valley like milk in a bowl, the ridges emerging like islands from a white sea. Underground, the limestone continues dissolving, creating new caves while old ones collapse, a process that occasionally swallows roads and buildings into sinkholes that open without warning. The Nebraska Sandhills spread across 20,000 square miles, the largest dune system in the Western Hemisphere, now held in place by a thin skin of grass. These dunes formed during dry periods in the past few thousand years when drought killed the grass, allowing wind to pile sand into dunes up to 400 feet tall. Today's grass covering is all that prevents them from becoming active again. A severe enough drought could remobilize billions of tons of sand. Beneath the dunes lies the Ogallala Aquifer, and the combination of sand and groundwater creates over 2,000 shallow lakes, unusual for such an arid-looking landscape. Ranchers here often find blowouts where wind has excavated the sand, revealing soil layers that tell of multiple cycles of dune activity and stability. The hills support a unique ecosystem, plants and animals adapted to sandy soil that drains quickly but has water close below. From the air, the sandhills show their true nature, the dune patterns clearly visible beneath the grass, like waves frozen in earth. Cattle ranching dominates because the land resists farming. Plowing would destroy the fragile grass cover and release the sand beneath. Crater of Diamonds. State Park in Arkansas offers the only place in the world where the public can search for diamonds in their original volcanic source and keep what they find. The diamonds formed 3 billion years ago, 100 miles below Earth's surface, carried up by a volcanic eruption 95 million years ago that punched through the crust like a bullet. The 37-acre field has yielded over 75,000 diamonds since the first was discovered in 1906, including the 40-carat Uncle Sam, the largest diamond ever found in North America. The volcanic soil erodes constantly, bringing new diamonds to the surface. Rain is the prospector's friend here, washing away dirt to expose gems. Visitors find about 2 diamonds daily on average, though most are small and industrial grade. The park's diamonds come in 3 colors: white, brown, and yellow, with the rare colors commanding premium prices. The volcanic pipe that brought them up also carried other deep earth minerals, making this a geological treasure trove. People search using methods from surface scanning to digging and sifting, each rain potentially exposing a fortune that's been waiting 3 billion years to see sunlight. The Hudson River defies normal river behavior, flowing both directions as tides push ocean water 153 miles inland to Troy, New York. This tidal estuary creates a brackish environment where saltwater fish swim past Albany, 200 miles from the ocean. Twice daily, the tide reverses the current, creating a river that can't decide which way to flow. The Lenape people called it the river that flows both ways, understanding its dual nature centuries before European arrival. The salt front, where fresh and salt water meet, migrates up and down the river seasonally, pushed inland during droughts, retreating toward the sea during spring floods. This movement creates multiple ecosystems in the same riverbed, supporting both marine and freshwater species depending on location and season. Striped bass spawn in the freshwater reaches but live in the ocean, using the river as a highway between worlds. The river carved its valley when sea levels were lower, cutting a gorge now drowned by rising waters since the Ice Age. At the Tappan Zee, the river widens to 3 miles, more like a lake than a river, before narrowing again through the Hudson Highlands. Glass Beach in California tells a story of transformation, where decades of garbage became accidental art. From 1906 to 1967, Fort Bragg residents threw garbage directly into the ocean at several sites, creating massive dumps of bottles, appliances, and cars. After the dumps closed, waves began their patient work, grinding glass into smooth pebbles, rusting away metal, pounding ceramics to sand. Today, the beaches sparkle with millions of smooth glass pebbles in greens, browns, and whites, with rare cobalt blues and reds from tail lights and medicine bottles commanding collectors' attention. The glass continues to diminish as visitors pocket souvenirs and waves grind pieces ever smaller, eventually becoming sand indistinguishable from the natural grains. The transformation took only 50 years, from dump to tourist attraction, showing nature's ability to reclaim and beautify human mistakes. What was once hazardous waste has become smooth treasures that children safely collect. The beach changes with each tide, storms bringing up new glass from deeper deposits while carrying away surface pieces. Some argue the beach should be left to complete its natural cycle, eventually returning to ordinary sand, while others want to preserve this unique moment in the intersection of human waste and natural processes. The Badlands of South Dakota erode at 1 inch per year, a geologic sprint that will erase these formations in just 500,000 years. This landscape seems more Martian than terrestrial, with layered buttes and pinnacles in bands of red, yellow, tan, and gray, each color marking a different ancient environment. The erosion exposes fossils constantly. Visitors regularly find ancient mammals that lived here when this was a subtropical forest. The rock is so soft you can carve it with a fingernail, yet it stands in vertical walls and sharp spires, held together by chemical cements that dissolve in rain. After storms, the Badlands smell of wet clay and sulfur from exposed shales. The formations change visibly year to year. Photographers comparing images find pinnacles vanished, walls collapsed, new gullies carved. This rapid erosion makes the Badlands a paleontologist's dream, constantly revealing new specimens. The layers tell a story of environmental change, river deposits, volcanic ash, ancient soils stacked like pages in a book. At night, the lack of light pollution reveals the Milky Way in such detail that its glow casts shadows, while the eroding formations stand like ancient ruins against the stars. Lake Champlain stretches between Vermont and New York, like a sixth Great Lake that didn't quite make the cut, though it held the title officially for 18 days in 1998 before Congress reversed itself. The lake reaches depths of 400 feet, deep enough that parts of its bottom lie below sea level. During the Ice Age, this was an arm of the Atlantic Ocean, the Champlain Sea, where whales swam and seals hunted. Their bones still occasionally emerge from clay deposits around the lake. The lake's narrow shape and north-south orientation create a wind tunnel that can generate waves 12 feet high, dangerous enough to sink large boats. Stories of Champ, the lake's supposed monster, date to the Abenaki peoples and continue today with blurry photos and sonar readings of large underwater objects. The lake served as a major transportation route before roads, its waters carrying everything from war canoes to lumber rafts. In winter, the lake becomes a highway of ice, though warming winters make safe crossings increasingly unpredictable. Thrust faults on both shores show where continents collided, pushing ancient seafloor thousands of feet skyward. U.S. territorial waters near Guam encompass the Mariana Trench's Challenger Deep, the deepest known point on Earth at 36,200 feet below sea level. If Mount Everest were placed in the trench, its summit would still be over a mile underwater. The pressure at the bottom exceeds 8 tons per square inch, enough to crush most submarines like aluminum cans. Yet life thrives here. Xenophyophores the size of softballs, sea cucumbers that swim, and bacteria that survive on chemicals seeping from the seafloor. The trench formed where the Pacific Plate dives beneath the Philippine Plate, descending into Earth's mantle to be recycled into magma. Only 4 manned descents have reached the bottom, fewer people than have walked on the moon. The water at the bottom is just above freezing, but never freezes due to the immense pressure. Sound travels differently here. The pressure and temperature create acoustic conditions where whale songs might travel for thousands of miles. The trench continues to deepen as the plates converge, though so slowly that changes are imperceptible in human lifetimes. The Loess Hills of western Iowa exist in only 2 places on Earth, here and in Shanxi Province, China, where the same Ice Age conditions created mirror landscapes on opposite sides of the Pacific. These hills formed from wind-blown silt, glacial flower ground from rocks, and carried by winds during dry periods between ice advances. The silt accumulated to depths of 200 feet, creating hills that look ordinary but are composed entirely of dust. The soil particles are so fine that road cuts stand vertical for years before eroding, defying the normal angle of repose. This deep, rich soil supports remnant prairies on steep slopes where plowing was impossible, preserving species that disappeared from the surrounding farmland. The hills change color through the seasons: green in spring, golden in summer, bronze in fall, sometimes pink at sunset when the silt catches the light. From ridgetops, the Missouri River Valley spreads below, showing how these hills once extended much farther before the river cut them back. The formation process couldn't happen today. The glaciers are gone, the climate is wetter, and vegetation holds soil in place. Old Faithful in Yellowstone has become less faithful over the decades, its intervals between eruptions stretching from 66 minutes in 1950 to 90 minutes today. This change reflects shifts in the underground plumbing system, where earthquakes create new cracks or seal old ones, altering how water circulates through the superheated rock below. The geyser erupts when water in underground chambers reaches critical temperature and pressure, flashing to steam in a chain reaction that empties the system. Between eruptions, you can watch the pool slowly refill, occasionally bubbling as steam escapes, building toward the next release. Park rangers now predict eruptions within a 10-minute window based on the previous eruption's duration. Longer eruptions empty more water, requiring more time to refill. The geyser has never stopped erupting in recorded history, though its pattern shifts after major earthquakes. Each eruption sends 3,200 to 8,400 gallons of boiling water up to 180 feet skyward, the steam plume visible for miles. Scientists have mapped the underground chambers using seismic waves, revealing a complex system of fractures and caverns, though much remains mysterious about why this particular spot became so regular when thousands of other hot springs in the park never developed into geysers. The Finger Lakes of New York lie like claw marks across the landscape, 11 parallel lakes carved by glaciers that deepened existing river valleys. These lakes plunge so deep that their bottoms lie below sea level, filled with water trapped behind glacial debris dams. Seneca Lake, the deepest, reaches 618 feet down, its bottom 66 feet below sea level, creating a body of water that never freezes completely despite brutal winters. The glaciers that carved these valleys flowed like rivers of ice, following paths of least resistance through softer rock, creating the parallel pattern unique in North America. The lake's depth creates unusual conditions. Naval testing occurs here because the acoustic properties resemble ocean environments. Local legends speak of drums echoing from the depths, likely caused by gases escaping from decomposing vegetation far below. The steep valley walls create microclimates perfect for vineyards, the deep water moderating temperatures and extending the growing season. Some lakes contain layers of water that haven't mixed in centuries, preserving chemical signatures from different eras, like tree rings in liquid form. Native Americans called this the land of the Great Spirit, believing the lakes were the handprint of their creator pressed into the earth. Point Barrow, Alaska, the northernmost point of the United States, experiences 82 days when the sun never sets in summer and 51 days of absolute darkness in winter. During the endless day, the sun circles the horizon like a lighthouse beam, never quite touching the water, casting shadows that rotate full circle. In the depths of polar night, only stars, aurora, and moon provide natural light, while the ice offshore glows with an eerie blue luminescence. This extreme light cycle affects everything: plants that photosynthesize continuously during summer, animals whose circadian rhythms abandon the 24-hour cycle, humans who cover windows in summer and use therapy lights in winter. The permafrost here reaches 1,500 feet deep, frozen since the Pleistocene, though it now thaws more each summer than it has in thousands of years. The point itself migrates as coastal erosion claims several feet yearly, while offshore, the ice that once pressed against shore year-round now disappears completely some summers. Polar bears hunt here where ice meets water, while bowhead whales navigate leads in the ice, their paths followed by Inupiat hunters whose ancestors have lived here for thousands of years, adapting to light extremes that would disorient most humans. The Great Dismal Swamp spanning Virginia and North Carolina holds peat deposits up to 12 feet thick, accumulated over thousands of years of plant growth and decay in water too acidic for complete decomposition. This horrible desert, as early colonists called it, preserved a wilderness that elsewhere fell to agriculture. The peat occasionally catches fire, burning underground for months, creating an apocalyptic landscape of smoke rising from seemingly wet ground. During the Civil War, escaped slaves formed maroon colonies here, living free in a place where most feared to venture. The swamp water appears black as coffee from tannins, so dark that boats seem to float in liquid night. Ancient tree stumps, some thousands of years old, emerge from the peat like monuments to forests that grew when the climate was different. The swamp breathes with the seasons, flooding in winter, drying enough in summer for the peat to crack, creating patterns like dried mud but in organic matter feet thick. Bears, bobcats, and over 200 bird species thrive here, including species normally found much farther south or north, making this a biological crossroads. Lake Drummond sits at the swamp's heart, a perfect oval seemingly placed by design, its origin still debated by geologists. Mount Rushmore's granite faces will gaze across the Black Hills for millions of years, eroding at just 1 inch per 10,000 years. This granite, exposed when softer overlying rock weathered away, formed 1.6 billion years ago deep underground, cooling slowly enough to create large crystals that give the rock its durability. The faces were carved between 1927 and 1941, removing 450,000 tons of rock. 90% by dynamite, the final inches by hand. The granite's natural fractures determined the placement. Jefferson was originally started to Washington's right, but had to be blasted away and recarved on the left when unsuitable rock was encountered. Each face is 60 feet tall, with eyes 11 feet wide and noses 20 feet long, proportions that look correct only from below. The mountain continues to crack along natural joints, requiring annual maintenance to seal fractures that could eventually calve off sections. Hidden behind Lincoln's Head lies a chamber intended to hold America's most important documents, though it contains only a few commemorative items. The monument changes color through the day, pink at dawn, white at noon, golden at sunset, as the granite's minerals reflect different wavelengths of light. Oregon's Alvord Desert exists in such an extreme rain shadow that parts receive less precipitation than Death Valley, qualifying as true desert despite being in the Pacific Northwest. The Steens Mountain Wall rises a mile above the desert floor, wringing moisture from any clouds that make it this far inland, creating a stark transition from alpine meadows to absolute desert in just a few horizontal miles. After rare rainstorms, the playa becomes a perfect mirror, reflecting the sky so clearly that the horizon disappears. The desert floor is so flat and hard that land speed records have been set here, the surface like natural concrete. Hot springs bubble at the mountain's base where fault lines allow deep water to surface, creating oases where travelers have soaked for centuries. The temperature can swing 70 degrees between day and night, the dry air unable to hold heat once the sun sets. Wild horses roam here, descendants of Spanish stock, surviving on sparse grasses and knowing every water source in hundreds of square miles. At night, with no lights for hundreds of miles, the stars appear close enough to touch, the Milky Way casting shadows on the pale ground. The Mississippi River Delta loses a football field of land every hour, a disappearing act visible from space as green marshes turn to open water. Since the 1930s, 2,000 square miles have vanished, an area larger than Delaware dissolved into the Gulf. The river wants to change course to the Atchafalaya, a shorter path to the sea, prevented only by massive engineering that may ultimately fail. The delta formed over 7,000 years as the river deposited its sediment load, building land that naturally subsides and must be constantly renewed. Levees now funnel that sediment past the wetlands into deep water, starving the marshes of the material needed to survive. Oil and gas extraction accelerates subsidence as underground fluids are removed, causing the land to compact and sink. Hurricanes deliver the final blow, storm surges pushing salt water deep inland, killing freshwater plants whose roots hold soil together. Entire communities have disappeared. Islands where hundreds lived now marked only by crosses rising from the waves. The loss accelerates itself. Less land means bigger waves reaching farther inland, causing more erosion. Native Americans, Cajuns, and fishing communities who lived here for generations watch their ancestral lands vanish beneath their feet. Jewel Cave in South Dakota continues revealing itself, with over 200 miles of passages mapped yet airflow studies suggesting 95% remains undiscovered. The cave breathes. Barometric pressure changes cause air to flow in or out of the entrance at speeds up to 30 miles per hour, sometimes creating tones like a massive organ pipe. The jewels that give the cave its name are calcite crystals coating the walls, sparkling in headlamp light like underground stars. These formations grow differently than typical stalactites. Hydromagnesite balloons inflate like rocky bubbles, cave pearls form in shallow pools, and flowstone drapes like frozen waterfalls. The cave maintains a constant 49 degrees, requiring explorers to wear wetsuits not for water, but for warmth during long survey trips. New passages are discovered regularly, sometimes breaking into rooms that have been sealed for millions of years, containing formations found nowhere else on Earth. The cave formed in multiple phases, first dissolved by acidic water, then decorated by minerals precipitating from solution, a process continuing today at rates measured in centuries per inch. Radio transmitters placed in the cave have been detected at the surface over 700 feet above, suggesting vast, unmapped spaces between known passages. Minnesota's Mesabi Range provided the iron that built America. Its open pit mines so vast, they're visible from space like rusty wounds in the earth. During World War II, 70% of the iron ore for American steel came from these deposits, the rocks that became ships, tanks, and bridges. The iron formed 2 billion years ago when early photosynthetic organisms began producing oxygen, which reacted with dissolved iron in ancient seas, precipitating as layers of iron oxide. These banded iron formations record the oxygenation of Earth's atmosphere, each red layer marking a pulse of oxygen production. The mines grew so large they swallowed entire towns. Communities relocated as the pit expanded, their former locations now hundreds of feet below water that has filled abandoned workings. The Hull Rust Mahoning mine stretches 3 miles long, 2 miles wide, and 600 feet deep, the largest open pit iron mine in the world. Taconite, once considered waste rock, now feeds the steel mills as higher grade ores are exhausted. The landscape resembles another planet. Red cliffs, turquoise pools where minerals color the water, terraces carved by giant trucks that look like toys from overlook viewpoints. Death Valley's sailing stones remained a mystery for decades, rocks up to 700 pounds that move across the flat desert floor, leaving trails in their wake. The stones only move under a precise combination of conditions that might occur once in a decade. The playa must flood to just the right depth, then freeze on cold winter nights, creating sheets of ice just thick enough to float but thin enough to be moved by wind. As the sun rises, the ice breaks into rafts that, pushed by even light winds, carry the rocks across the slippery mud below. The trails record their journeys, straight lines, curves, even reversals when wind direction changes. Some stones have traveled over 1,500 feet, their paths crossing and diverging like a slow-motion dance choreographed by weather. Before scientists finally observed movement in 2014, theories ranged from magnetic fields to dust devils to hoaxes. The tracks can last for years in this desert where rain falls rarely, creating a palimpsest of movement across the playa. The stones themselves are otherwise ordinary, fallen from surrounding mountains, but their journeys transform them into mysteries that captured imaginations for over a century. The Rio Grande tells a split personality story, being actually 2 rivers with the same name that join at El Paso to become one. The northern Rio Grande begins in Colorado's San Juan Mountains, flowing through New Mexico, while the Mexican Rio Conchos provides most of the water for the lower river. Without the Conchos, the Rio Grande would run dry before reaching the Gulf of Mexico, as so much water is diverted for irrigation. The river has changed course repeatedly, stranding parts of Mexico in the United States and vice versa, creating legal complications that persist today. In some reaches, the river disappears entirely into underground channels during drought, re-emerging miles downstream. The Rio Grande Rift, which the river follows through New Mexico, continues to widen by millimeters each year, eventually perhaps creating an inland sea. Ancient peoples built elaborate irrigation systems that modern engineers still study, understanding water management in ways we're only rediscovering. The river supports endangered silvery minnows that require specific flow patterns to spawn, their survival tied to water politics involving 2 nations and multiple states. By the time it reaches the Gulf, the river is often just a trickle, its waters claimed so many times that in some years it fails to reach the sea at all. Lake Superior's Apostle Islands hold more lighthouses than any other site in the national park system. 9 historic lights scattered across 6 islands, each telling stories of ships saved and lost. These lighthouses were critical when Superior was the highway for iron ore, grain, and lumber. But brutal storms and hidden shoals made navigation treacherous. The lights range from simple towers to elaborate Victorian houses where keepers raised families in isolation, supplied by boats that sometimes couldn't land for weeks during storms. Devil's Island Light Station experienced such violent storms that furniture slid across rooms and keepers tied themselves to beds to sleep. The islands themselves are sculptural masterpieces, red sandstone carved by waves into caves that ring like bells when waves strike, accessible only when ice forms thick enough to walk on. In winter, spray freezes on the cliffs, creating ice caves illuminated blue and green by filtered sunlight. The islands host the largest collection of black bears in Wisconsin, swimming between islands in summer, denning in caves during winter. Each island has its own microclimate. One might be shrouded in fog, while another basks in sunshine a mile away. Mount McKinley, or Denali as it's now officially known, generates weather so extreme it creates its own jet stream disturbances. The mountain is so massive, it creates gravity waves in the atmosphere, ripples that can affect air travel thousands of miles away. Winds regularly exceed 150 miles per hour at the summit, with temperatures dropping to -100 degrees Fahrenheit when wind chill is calculated. The mountain creates lenticular clouds that look like UFOs, formed when moist air flows over the peak and condenses in standing waves. Climbers describe the mountain as breathing, weather patterns that pulse in cycles, windows of calm between storms that might last days or just hours. The summit sits at a lower barometric pressure than peaks of similar height elsewhere due to the Earth's rotation and polar location, making the effective altitude even more challenging. Glaciers flow down every valley, creaking and groaning as they move, occasionally surging forward at rates of hundreds of feet per day. The mountain is still growing, pushed up by the collision of tectonic plates, rising faster than erosion can wear it down, the highest peak in North America still reaching for greater heights. The Kentucky Bend exists as a geographic oddity, a piece of Kentucky completely surrounded by Missouri and Tennessee, accessible by land only through Tennessee. This bubble of land formed when the Mississippi River created an extreme meander, nearly doubling back on itself before an earthquake in 1812 shortened the loop. The area is sometimes called Bubble Land, home to about 18 people who must drive through Tennessee to reach the rest of Kentucky. Mail delivery requires carriers to cross state lines, and children attend school in Tennessee because no Kentucky school is accessible. During the Civil War, both sides largely ignored this confusing piece of geography, making it a haven for those avoiding conflict. The land floods regularly, being some of the lowest elevation in Kentucky, creating rich farmland when the waters recede. Property laws here are complex. Deeds reference landmarks that no longer exist, rivers that have moved, and surveys that contradict each other. The isolation has preserved a way of life largely unchanged for generations, where farming follows rhythms set by the river rather than modern schedules. Utah's Bonneville Salt Flats formed when ancient Lake Bonneville evaporated, leaving mineral deposits up to 6 feet thick, spread across 30,000 acres. This lake once covered most of Utah, as large as Lake Michigan, before climate change caused it to shrink and eventually disappear, leaving only the Great Salt Lake as its remnant. The flats are so perfectly level that you can see the curvature of the earth. Distant mountains appear to sink below the horizon. The surface rebuilds itself each winter when brief floods dissolve and redeposit salt, creating a fresh, smooth crust by spring. Land speed records set here require the salt to be just right. Too wet and vehicles sink, too dry and the crust crumbles. The salt isn't pure sodium chloride, but contains potassium and magnesium that give it different properties than table salt. Mining operations have removed millions of tons, causing the salt layer to thin and the raceable area to shrink. After rain, the flats become the world's largest mirror, reflecting the sky so perfectly that the horizon disappears, creating a disorienting world of white and blue with no reference points. The aurora borealis occasionally dances across skies much farther south than usual, with the 1859 Carrington event producing auroras visible in the Caribbean and Hawaii. This solar storm was so powerful that telegraph systems worldwide failed, with operators receiving shocks and telegraph paper catching fire from induced currents. If a similar event occurred today, it would likely destroy satellites, power grids, and electronic systems across entire continents. The aurora appears when charged particles from the sun interact with Earth's magnetic field, creating curtains of light that ripple and pulse across the sky. Different gases create different colors. Oxygen produces green and red. Nitrogen creates blue and purple. The lights make sounds reported by many observers: crackling, whooshing, rustling, though scientists debate whether these are real or psychological effects. Native peoples have various explanations. The Sami see them as energies of the departed. Some Inuit groups believe they're spirits playing with walrus skulls. The aurora follows an 11-year cycle tied to solar activity, with the next maximum expected soon, increasing chances of seeing the lights at lower latitudes. Spider Cave in Carlsbad Caverns challenges even experienced cavers, requiring belly crawls through passages just 12 inches high, where the ceiling presses against your back while you push forward with toes and fingers. This wild cave, unlike the developed tourist sections, preserves formations so delicate that a breath can destroy them. The cave earned its name from the spider-like formations created by minerals precipitating in unusual ways, creating webs of stone that seem to defy gravity. Some passages are so tight that cavers must exhale to compress their chests enough to squeeze through, a technique called the exhale push. The cave maintains pristine formations because so few people can access it. Permits are limited and require proven caving experience. Inside, the silence is absolute, except for dripping water and your own breathing. A sensory deprivation that some find peaceful, others terrifying. Formations here exist nowhere else in the Carlsbad system. Cave velvet that looks like fur, pool fingers that grow underwater, and shields so thin that light passes through. The cave continues beyond explored sections, with passages too small for humans, suggesting vast spaces that may never be seen. The Cascade Range forms a line of fire from Northern California through Washington, containing every volcano in the contiguous United States that has erupted in the last 200 years. These peaks are part of the Ring of Fire, where the Juan de Fuca plate slides beneath North America, melting to create magma that rises through the crust. Each volcano has its own personality: Hood's slow dome building, Shasta's compound construction, Rainier's massive glaciers hiding volcanic heat. The range creates a dramatic rain shadow, with western slopes receiving over 100 inches of precipitation, while eastern valleys might get 10. Mount Baker holds the world record for snowfall in a single season, 95 feet in 1998 to 99. These volcanoes don't follow predictable patterns. Some erupt regularly, others sleep for millennia before awakening violently. Indigenous peoples recorded eruptions in oral histories that match geological evidence, stories passed down for hundreds of generations. The volcanoes support unique ecosystems, wildflowers that bloom at treeline, glaciers that hide volcanic vents, and forests that regrow in patterns determined by pyroclastic flows. Racetrack Playa in Death Valley stretches so perfectly flat that standing in its center, the curvature of Earth blocks your view of the surrounding mountains' bases, creating the illusion of peaks floating above the horizon. This ancient lakebed, dried and cracked into polygonal tiles, provides the stage for the sailing stone's mysterious journeys. The playa's surface is smoother than many human-made floors, with elevation varying by just inches over its 3-mile length. After rare rains, the playa becomes a shallow lake, transforming the desert into a perfect mirror that reflects the sky with such clarity that pilots report becoming disoriented. As the water evaporates, it leaves behind microscopic layers of mud that build up over millennia, creating the flat surface. The mountains surrounding the playa continue to erode, occasionally sending new rocks to join the sailing stone fleet. At night, with no light pollution for hundreds of miles, the stars reflect in any remaining water, creating a universe above and below. The silence here is so complete that your own heartbeat becomes loud, a place where the absence of sound has its own presence. And so we've traveled together across this vast American canvas, from burning ghost towns to singing sand dunes, from underwater caves to mountain peaks that scrape the sky. Each of these places continues its ancient work even now as you rest. Stones sailing across desert floors, caves breathing through hidden passages, mountains rising by imperceptible degrees. The geography of America isn't just a collection of coordinates and elevations. It's a living testament to time itself, where every valley remembers its river, every mountain holds its volcanic heart, and every grain of sand tells of the stone it once was. These landscapes exist in a time frame beyond human comprehension, yet they cradle our brief presence with patient indifference. Tomorrow, the sun will find Cadillac Mountain first. The tide will turn the Hudson River around. And somewhere in Kentucky, another few inches of cave will be discovered. The Yellowstone caldera will rise or fall a fraction of an inch. The Mississippi will claim another football field of Louisiana. A sailing stone in Death Valley might move another foot on its mysterious journey. But tonight, let these places continue their slow transformations while you rest, knowing that this vast, breathing landscape will still be here when you wake. Perhaps a millimeter different, perhaps with one more grain of sand shifted, carrying on its eternal conversation with time. The earth beneath you is never truly still. It remembers when it was seafloor, when ice covered everything, when different stars marked north. Sleep well, fellow traveler, upon this restless, remarkable earth. Good night.